So today I'm going to show you how to do 12 different watercolor techniques. This is the example of after they're finished. So this is going to show you how to create different textures and different effects using watercolor. So the supplies that you need are your watercolor paper, your watercolor paints, some water, a paper towel. I'm using a flat brush. These work really well for washes, but you can use whatever brushes you have, and then I'm going to use a smaller brush. Elmer's rubber cement, just some table salt, rubbing alcohol, and a push pin or just a needle. We're going to be using that to scratch into our paper. And then some kind of object you want to use to stamp. Leaves work really well. I'm just going to be using this checkers piece, a straw, and some masking tape. So divide your watercolor paper with your tape into 10 different areas. So I just put tape around the outside and then I divide up the middle with tape. Okay, and then just count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can divide it up however you want. I chose to paint with 3 colors, purple, blue, and brown, but you can choose whatever colors you want. So the key with a lot of these steps is having a large puddle of paint mixed over here. So to do that, you just get your water and drop it into a puddle in your tray. Or if you don't have one of these, you can just use a plate. And then to create a flat wash, you need quite a lot of paint mixed up. So I'm just gonna mix up like a purple blue-ish color. And I usually use my paper towel to kind of test my color. Load your brush up with paint. So you just wanna soak it up and make sure there's a lot of paint on your paintbrush. Okay, so to create a flat wash, kind of tilt your paper up and see how it kind of pools. You're just gonna keep pulling that pool down. And you get a flat wash means it's not light or dark anywhere, it's just one flat color. So I'm gonna show you how to do a gradiated wash. So that's where you go from one color into another color, or where you go from one color and you make it lighter. And use whatever colors you want. And we'll just do it in this little square down here. You start at the top and you slowly start getting rid of the color on your brush. I'm just dipping it into my water. And you can also blot off your brush. So by the end, you don't have very much paint on there, and you don't want to overwork your paper, but if you have puddles like that, you can kind of soak them up. So you're just slowly adding water basically as you go down. Now before we do this next step, I'm going to show you really quick how to use rubber cement. So this masks your paper, so it kind of creates like a shield so the paint doesn't get onto it. Choose one of your squares and just circle or paint that rubber cement right on there. This tape is masking as well. This technique is called wet and wet. So you can just paint your whole square with water and drop color into it. Let's just do it in this square right here. So just paint it with water. Make sure it's nice and wet. And if your paper is a little thinner, be careful going back and forth. You might tear through it. And then I'm just gonna grab a little bit of blue. And let's say I wanted to add a little purple, maybe at the bottom. So you can kind of see how it kind of bleeds and blends. It's nice for creating like a hazy background. Now I'm going to show you a technique called sgraffito. So grab a push pin or a needle, something with a sharp point. What you're going to do is you're going to scratch your design into this. So sgraffito always, it sounds like scratching, right? So that's basically what you're doing. This is great for creating the texture of wood. So you can't really see it yet, but wait, just wait. This usually works better with a little bit of a darker color. I'm just gonna grab a little brown and mix it. Okay, now watch as I paint. The paint should start to seep into those lines I just pressed. And again, be careful. I know I'm going back over it, but you really need to try to avoid doing that as much as you can. So now let me show you how to use salt. This usually takes a long time to dry, so let's just do it early on, and maybe we'll do it in this square. I'm gonna do it with a bright blue. You can use whatever color you want. Just a darker color is probably gonna show up a little better. So before I paint, I'm gonna get my salt ready. Just pour a little into your hand. And if you're left-handed, you should have your paints on the other side of your paper. I'm right-handed, so I have them on the right. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a flat wash. This one I'm not tilting up, so you can kind of see the difference that makes. Okay, and then you just sprinkle a little salt onto it. And this really doesn't work if your paint is dry. Okay, the next technique I want to show you really quick is rubbing alcohol. What happens when you use rubbing alcohol? So get your rubbing alcohol, pour it into like a little jar. I'm just going to pour it right into the lid and set it on top of my paper. I'm just going to use brown for this. And I'll do it in this one. You can dip the back of your paintbrush
into it.
Or you can grab a straw and you can dip that into it. I kind of think it makes the texture of like the surface of Mars or something. So the rubbing alcohol basically pushes the paint away from it. So So this is called lifting off. So we're gonna create a sky with clouds using this technique, and all you need is your paper towel to do this. This is a really easy way to make clouds, but you just have to do it kind of fast. So of course you don't have to use blue. The sky is not always blue. If your paint is dry, this technique doesn't really work too well. So go ahead and paint your square in. Then you get your paper towel and you start to dabbing it with my paper towel. Okay, so that's a really easy way to paint clouds. The rubber cement needs to be completely dry when we paint over it, so we're gonna wait just a minute for that. Okay, now really quickly I'm gonna show you how to paint from one color into the next, and since I already have two colors here, I'm just gonna use those. So you basically start out with one color, and then you slowly start dipping your paintbrush into the other color. So it just kind of fades from one to the next. Okay, I'm gonna show you a dry brushing technique in this next step. What you wanna do is get your brush dry. That's why it's called dry brush. And I'm gonna create kind of like a fur texture or grass. And I'm just gonna make sure it's all kind of dry and feathered out. Then I'm gonna dip it in my brown and kind of make sure it's like nice and scratchy. Sometimes when you dip it in your paint, it goes back together. Sometimes instead of scratching into it, you can just use this dry brushing technique. Okay, so that's a dry brushing technique. So you kind of get a cool texture when you do that. Let's check our rubber cement. While we wait for that, I'm gonna show you a spattering technique. Choose one of your squares. It's basically you're just splattering paint onto it. You can flick it like this, or you can hit it on your hand like this. Toothbrushes work really well for this. So the next technique I'm going to show you is stamping. So take your leaf or whatever you want, get it, and you need to just paint it with watercolor. I'll do it in the square. So this is my gradiated wash. So I'm just going to paint this first, and then I'm just going to stamp it. You can kind of see how you can get some cool textures just by stamping. Okay, I think that our rubber cement is dry enough to paint over. Since I already have this color mixed up, I think I'm just gonna use it. Okay, so just paint a flat wash over the top. And we're just gonna let that dry. This is how I create trees sometimes. I think it's really fun for any age. So let's just maybe do it over our clouds. You can use whatever color you want. I'm just choosing this color palette for whatever reason. So I'm just gonna get my brown, get a little blue, and then you're just gonna get whatever color you're gonna make your tree out of. Just gonna put squeeze a little dot of it onto your watercolor paper. You're gonna take your straw and you're gonna blow it, not too hard. And then you can blow it in different directions. So you see how it kind of creates like a nice tree trunk kind of with branches. And then if you want more branches, you just drop more paint on there and blow it out. This technique is called lifting off. So this is where you just take some of the paint off that's on the paper. You're just going to take your small brush, make sure it's clean. It needs to be wet, so dip it in your water, and you're just gonna paint a circle with it. If your paper's thick, this works really well. It's thin, not quite as well. This technique works really well for like a sun and a sunset. So as soon as your rubber cement is dry, you can start to rub it off. Okay, so the last technique I'm going to show you is called glazing. In watercolor, you can paint a color over the top of the other color, not just to add details, but you can add shadows, you can do a bunch of different things with it. I'll show you really quick over the rubber cement. Just get a blue, and I'm just going to paint it right over the top. Okay, so the next step is taking all of your tape off. So how did we create this? This is dry brushing. So we took a lot of the water off and we created this texture. So dry brushing. This is a graded wash from one color into the next. So you just start adding a little bit of the color as you go on. This is a flat wash, and then we spattered paint over the top of it. Just kind of flicked it with our paintbrush, and you can use a toothbrush for that as well. This is sgraffitos, where we scratched into it and then we painted it. It creates a cool texture, almost like wood. This is where we painted a flat wash and then we dropped some table salt into it and let it dry. It's not gonna happen immediately. It takes a while for it to work. This is where we used rubber cement. We just put it on there, let it dry, and then we painted over it and rubbed it off and glazed another color over the top of it. This has a few techniques in it. We painted a flat wash, and then we used our paper towel to just pull some clouds up off of it. We also pulled some color off of this one. And then we used a straw to blow the shape of the tree out of just a dot of color. We used alcohol to create this texture, rubbing alcohol. Created a flat wash, and then we just dipped a straw into it and did this. This, we created a graded wash from dark to light, just by adding water as we went on, and then we stamped, and this is a wet and wet wash. So those are the techniques we went over. I'm gonna hurry and label these. Okay, so after it's labeled, it should look something like this. I hope you enjoy painting with watercolors and that this was helpful for you, and you have a great day. We'll see you around on YouTube. If you're interested in painting more watercolors, this is a beginner step. We also have this link, how to paint a sunset in watercolor, how to paint these flowers using watercolor, how to paint a color wheel using watercolor. So if you're interested, we have plenty of watercolor tutorials and there's going to be more to come. So also, here's a link to how to clean your brushes, which is pretty important, taking care of them. So I hope you have a wonderful day and we will see you around on YouTube.